In the late 90s, there was no other show on TV that boasted as dedicated a fan base as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Centered around the adventures of a high school slayer and her friends, the series would go on to become one of the most influential TV shows in the history of the medium, with literal academic papers written about it. In this marvelous video, we will be exploring various aspects of the hit TV show, which single-handedly raised the bar for genre filmmaking everywhere. But before we move on, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It might be just a small click for you, but to us it means an awful lot. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The epic journey of crafting Buffy the Vampire Slayer. According to creator Joss Whedon, the controlling idea behind Buffy was pretty straightforward. The story had to be about a seemingly insignificant woman who turns out to be completely extraordinary. Whedon, who later went on to helm blockbuster franchises like The Avengers, wanted to invent the established horror film trope of the innocent blonde girl who walks into a dark alley only to be killed. Thus, in many ways, Buffy is feminist storytelling done right, unlike the heavy-handed messaging that we see in Hollywood today. The show began its story's history as a movie script by the same name. In Whedon's head, what he had penned was a scary tale about an empowered woman. However, when he pitched it to studios, they urged him to reduce it to a broad comedy with horror elements. Whedon was still a new name in the industry and decided to go ahead with the compromise. The resulting film, which saw Kristy Swanson in the role of Buffy, was a mid-tier success that was eventually forgotten by the masses. Despite his inability to get the dark and more mature version of his script made, Whedon held onto the idea for several years, and we couldn't be more grateful that he did. Several years later, Gail Berman, the CEO of Sand Dollar Television, which owned the TV rights to the show, approached Whedon with a strange proposal. They wanted him to turn the movie into a TV show. Whedon leapt at the opportunity to realize his dream project and came up with the guiding principle for the series. High school, but as a horror film. Thus, it was decided that the TV show would be much more serious than the film and would lean into issues revolving around adolescence and the onset of adulthood. This would stay a constant theme throughout the 7-season run of the show, with many of the most memorable monsters and supernatural phenomena being framed as metaphors for the anxieties of our teenage years. Upon watching Buffy, it is evident, even in the earliest episodes, that the creators want the story to transcend the supernatural setting it is placed in. Despite having all the ingredients necessary to cook up a pop culture phenomenon, there's a great deal of effort to go a step beyond. Each episode is filled with extremely imaginative subtext that often points towards a real human dilemma. Of course, something like this cannot be written without meticulous thought behind every single line, as well as its possible metaphorical, political, and philosophical implications. The show weaves these heavier themes with elements from well-known horror novels, movies, folklore, and mythology. Even our protagonist isn't above these mundane problems, as we often see her more disturbed by the problems in her personal life than any vampire could ever manage. There are also references to sexual development and identity, which are obvious but never come across as heavy-handed or preachy. Marvel, if you're listening, take notes. However, none of this poignant commentary would work if the show wasn't good at balancing tones. Buffy's episodes can go from hilarious to heartbreaking tearjerkers in a matter of minutes. More often than not, these conflicting tones coexist simultaneously, something that Whedon is actually a master at. Though we have grown rather used to his style after films like Avengers and Justice League, it was revolutionary in 1997 when Buffy first appeared on our TV screens. Now that we're caught up with the philosophy and creative forces that shape Buffy's story, let's look at another aspect that makes the show beloved: its stellar casting. And there's no better place to begin than Buffy herself. Buffy Ann Summers was played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, who had been acting in movies since the ripe old age of 5. Initially, other actresses like Katie Holmes and Selma Blair were considered for the titular character, while Gellar was supposed to play a different character. But Gellar's audition tape left such an impact on Whedon that she was called back in to audition for the main role. The rest, as they say, is history. Another strange incident occurred during the casting process for the vampire Angel, who is also Buffy's love interest. A Hollywood agent apparently found David Boreanaz out of the blue when the actor was walking his dog. The agent immediately contacted the casting director responsible for the show, claiming that he had found the anti-hero. And you know what? He was right. Other notable additions to the cast include veteran actor Anthony Stewart Head as Rupert Giles, while newcomer Nicholas Brendan cracked the audition for Xander Harris. Danny Strong, who had initially auditioned for Harris's role, was instead given the part of Jonathan Levinson. Of the original 6, the last character to be cast was Willow Rosenberg, though the character had already been played by Riff Reagan in the show's unaired pilot. It was the arrival of Alison Hannigan that Willow found her cheerful, upbeat voice despite being someone who regularly undergoes bullying. With this, Buffy and her friends were ready. All that remained was to see how the audience received them. The first episode premiered on the 10th of March 1997 as a mid-season replacement for a show called Savannah on WB Network. Buffy was one of the first massive hits for Warner Brothers in its early years as a TV network, and its rating made it evident that the show was here to stay. Along its 7-season journey, Buffy won everything from multiple Emmys to the AFI Awards for Best Drama Series. I guess that at this point, we're all caught up in how Buffy the Vampire Slayer came to be. That means that it's time to finally examine the show's dense lore and intricate storylines, exploring episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy's long and complex tale begins with 2-hour series premiere, which picks up right where Whedon's original feature had left off, with Ann Summers and her mother moving to the small Californian town called Sunnydale. However, this is where the similarities with the feature film end, and it is obvious from the get-go the show seeks to set a completely different tone for itself. In the very first scene of the show, we are treated to a young boy being killed by a vampire at a time we least expected, if you know what I mean. The next morning, the new girl, Buffy Summers, makes her way to Sunnydale High School, where Principal Flutie offers her a chance to start fresh. Of course, chances like these are especially hard to come by, especially if you're someone who burned down your last school's vampire-infested gymnasium. Over the rest of the episode, Buffy encounters the other members of the soon-to-be-formed Scooby Gang, such as Xander, Willow, and Cordelia. But Buffy's most fateful meeting is the one with Professor Giles, who turns out to be Buffy's watcher. After realizing that Buffy is indeed the chosen Slayer, a figure that only appears once in a generation, Giles gives her the most aptly titled book of all time, Vampire. As Buffy is still dealing with the fact that even in Sunnydale, she had been recognized as the Slayer, the murder from the prologue is discovered. Upon closer investigation, it's evident that the boy had been killed by a vampire. This leads Buffy to confront Giles and her own identity, which provides us with a glimpse of how the responsibility is actually tearing the teenager apart. That evening, Buffy gathers with her friends at Bronze, a hangout site, where she has another ominous encounter with a mysterious man. After a small misunderstanding, the stranger, named Angel, reveals to Buffy that the town of Sunnydale was built on top of a Hellmouth. While a mythical event called Harvest just around the corner, the portal to the Netherworld could open any given day. Before leaving, he hands her a silver cross necklace. It is also at this party that Buffy really gets to know the shy and reserved Willow, with the two striking up a close friendship. Thanks to Buffy's pep talk, Willow manages to find a guy at the Bronze and leaves. However, this goes wrong in the most terrible ways. Turns out that Willow's new friend Thomas is actually a vampire, and a close friend of Darla, the girl who had murdered the boy in the gym. When Buffy realizes this, she is forced to confess her true identity to Xander, and the two set out to look for the friend. The duo finds the vampire in the most predictable hiding spot, which is a cemetery, and manages to free their friend. A battle ensues between Buffy, her friends, and the vampires, but unknown to any of them, an ancient monster is waking up deep below the streets of Buffy's town. This is the Master, the oldest vampire of them all, and he sends out his trusted servant Luke to hunt down the young blood. Luke crashes the fight, and within moments, he shows us why the Master trusts him so much. He overpowers Buffy, pushing her into the stone crypt, and is just about to go in for the kill when something strange happens. The vampire is repelled by Angel's mysterious cross, allowing our protagonist to escape. But this also alerts the Master to the presence of a Slayer in town. With some help from Giles, Xander and Willow eventually grow accustomed to the idea of vampires, demons, and slayers walking around them in complete secrecy. The team spends the rest of the episode investigating the supernatural phenomena suddenly brewing in their town, which leads Buffy to Sunnydale's tunnel system. While searching for an entrance to the crypt, Buffy is ambushed by the Master's accomplices and only manages to escape because Xander had followed her to that point. I guess there really is something to teamwork. Anyway, they return to Giles, who reveals that the Helmuth is, in essence, a portal to the darker reality. For 60 years, the Master had been haunting Sunnydale, waiting for his chance at opening the Helmuth. Well, it seems that his patience has paid off, and finally the opportunity arrives. Buffy returns home to gather weapons, but ends up getting grounded for missing school. Hilarious, yeah? Frustrating? Even more so. But this is genuinely what makes Buffy great. As throughout the show, Buffy is forced to choose between her life as a high schooler and a vampire slayer. But Buffy is nothing if not resourceful, and she manages to escape from a window. The team gathers at the Bronze, and soon all hell breaks loose. Luke and the other vampires rush into the Bronze, but this time around our heroes are prepared. Despite all his vampire abilities, Luke is still an idiot, and he mistakes an artificial light for the sun and falls for Buffy's trick. The Slayer, quite predictably, slays. The others also manage to hold their own against the attacking vampires, and the Master's plans are thwarted. The next morning, Giles tells our heroes what they already know in their hearts. The battle is won, but the war remains. This two-part premiere perfectly exemplifies the strong aspects of the show, which would go on to define Buffy the Vampire Slayer for its entire run. Even though each episode is self-contained, for the most part, it also plants broader overarching narratives that unfold through the course of the season. The small additions to a larger storyline eventually point towards the big bad, who has to be defeated by the end of each installment. It is also clear that Buffy's team is a master at blending contrasting genres like comedy, horror, martial arts, romance, melodrama, science fiction, and even musicals. But the heart of the show is the empathy it has for both its heroes and villains, almost always forcing them into dilemmas that allow us to catch a glimpse of human nature itself. Take, for example, the third episode of the show, titled The Witch. Here we find Buffy auditioning for the cheerleaders team when horrible accidents start happening around the cheerleading squad. As the mystery is gradually unveiled, we realize that at the center of all of this is a girl called Amy Madison. But the accidents aren't Amy's fault. Instead, it's her mother, a skilled witch called Catherine, who is the culprit. But Catherine's motivations aren't really evil. Instead, they're oddly human. Catherine, who had once been a highly acclaimed cheerleader during her high school years, had been switching bodies with her daughter to relive her golden days. But when she found out that she could no longer compete with the younger generation, even after possessing her own daughter, Catherine began resorting to more malicious methods. You know, like spontaneously combusting people's hands. Though the story is about witches and cheerleaders, it is also saying something much deeper about aging and ambition. Thus, I guess that it's extremely fitting that when Amy's mom is finally defeated, his spirit hides away inside a trophy that had been awarded so many years ago to Catherine the Great. It was due to impeccable writing like this that every episode of Buffy felt like a fresh roller coaster of emotions that could deal with anything from demon teachers taking advantage of virgin students, ignored students turning invisible, and bullies being possessed. Of course, each of these incidents is heavily layered with metaphors and alternate meanings, which become even more interesting with rewatches. Even Buffy isn't exempt from these adolescent problems. Just take a look at her turbulent romance with Angel later in the season, and you will find one of the most perceptive depictions of young romance ever put on TV. This continues through all 7 seasons of the show, and even through newer villains like the Anointed One and Spike keep appearing. Buffy never loses sight of what makes it special. Newer slayers, werewolves, warlocks, and demons all make appearances, but the show never loses its humanity. As the characters literally grow over the seasons, they go off to college, and the complexity of their problems increase, but they never waver in fighting the good fight. By the end of the show, Buffy succeeds in raising all literal legion of slayers in order to permanently close the Helmuth and save her beloved town. Of course, with a show as complicated as Buffy, one can never state that they have covered all bases, but I guess this is enough to get you started. But if you still need convincing, let's take a look at the brilliant cast and characters that bring the magical town of Sunnydale to life. The main characters. Buffy Summers. Buffy Ann Summers is a girl who doesn't need an introduction, especially in a video that wouldn't exist if not for her. Buffy found her calling as a slayer at the young age of 15, but found herself reluctant to be a hero. One day, the young girl began dreaming of other women from other historical periods fighting monsters. Though she remained unaware of her identity at this point, it was clear that Buffy was meant for something special. She moved from LA to Sunnydale after a particularly nasty incident involving vampires at her old school. In the beginning, Buffy seemed almost annoyed with the fact that she was a slayer, and that all she really longed for was to have her old life back. Fortunately for Sunnydale, her friends, the Scooby Gang, were able to support her through this transition, and Buffy soon accepted her destiny. Over the course of the series, Buffy grows from a reluctant teenage girl to a genuine hero, saving the world time and time again. She also happens to be one of the longest-lived slayers and has literally returned from death, not once, but twice. All of this was enough to disrupt the traditional line that passes through the Slayer, allowing Buffy to coexist with two others who come to light after her deaths. An extremely accomplished and feared individual in supernatural circles, she is also responsible for raising an army of slayers to protect the world from a threat of vampires. But it isn't just the magical powers that make Buffy so amazing. She also happens to be one of the most relatable characters in all of fiction. Buffy, the child of a broken marriage, lives with her mother Joyce, and they share a very close bond despite being at odds numerous times. Before becoming a Slayer, Buffy was a bit superficial, but eventually gained a great deal of empathy, even for people labeled outcasts, like Willow and Xander. She also has a very rebellious streak with an extreme disdain for being manipulated. Throughout the show, Buffy undergoes many challenges and tragedies, both personal and public, but her righteous personality shines through even in the darkest of circumstances. Maybe that's why we can't help rooting for her, even when she goes astray or loses faith in herself, because we know sooner or later, Buffy is going to save the day. Xander. Alexander Harris, better known as Xander, is the first true friend Buffy makes after her move to Sunnydale High. Outwardly, Xander appears to be a sarcastic jerk with the most sardonic views of life, but under his rough exterior lies a boy who is vulnerable and traumatized. Growing up with an alcoholic and abusive father seems to have left permanent scars on Xander's psyche, as he is constantly haunted by his feelings of insecurity. As with Buffy, Xander was also able to grow past his inhibitions as a part of the Scooby Club, which helped him to recover. One of Xander's closest relationships is with Willow, a fellow outcast, and the two even dated for a while when they were 5. Xander also had unrequited for Buffy for a major part of the series, and this becomes especially important after the commencement of Buffy's romance with Angel. The guy really does seem to have the worst luck with the ladies, as most of his partners usually turn out to be demons or worse. Though Xander is just human with no magical powers of his own, he is still an integral part of the Scooby Gang. As an empathetic individual, he is often able to defeat villains just by appealing to their more humanistic side, like he did with Dark Willow. Xander is also a brilliant strategist with a knack for coming up with out-of-the-box solutions for complex problems in the blink of an eye. In the later part of the series, Xander uses his strategic and tactical proficiencies to train a group of slayers, witches, and seers against impending magical threats. Willow Rosenberg is definitely our pick for the greatest character arc in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. From a geek to a literal witch, that's quite a journey, starting as a bullied and reserved computer nerd who was more or less invisible among her more flamboyant classmates. Willow underwent a positive change after meeting her best friend Buffy Summers. She grew increasingly confident episode after episode, eventually turning into a funny, self-assured individual with an unusually high vampire body count. Through her numerous encounters with the supernatural, Willow realized that she had a gift for witchcraft and casting spells. Of course, like any good monster hunter, she would continue to hone her skills until she became one of the most formidable magic practitioners in the series. As declared by the eternal goddess, Willow is easily the most powerful witch on Earth, with powers ranging from telekinesis to invisibility. Though usually level-headed and rational, Willow is prone to fits of rage, especially when something threatens the people she has feelings for, like Xander or the school guitarist Oz. Willow's changing character is not limited to just her powers. She even goes through a kind of sexual discovery after breaking up with Oz. From that point on, Willow would go on to explicitly date a string of women throughout the season. However, the real twist for Willow's character comes in the story arc titled Dark Willow, where the sweet, shy girl becomes corrupted by dark magic and turns her impressive abilities against her best friends. This leads to some of the most tense situations in the series, both emotionally and narratively. Angel. Angel's character is the perfect example of how far-reaching the lore of the Buffyverse is. Angel was born in 1727 in Ireland as Liam. This makes Buffy and Angel the world's first teenage couple, with more than 100 years between them, way before Twilight came up with the idea. Well, jokes aside, Angel is one of the most important characters in the story owing to his on and off romance with our protagonist. After being sired by Darla in 1753, Liam took up the name Angelus and went on to pull off some really heinous crimes that earned him the title of the worst vampire to ever exist. This was too much to bear for the vampire, as he found himself riddled with the everlasting guilt of all the lives he had taken. Angel came back to the 20th century and joined Buffy Summers as a comrade and lover. Despite their great passion for each other, the couple couldn't last. In the later seasons, Angel would take up the identity of a masked vigilante called Twilight. Eventually, Angel came to see the error of his ways, but ended up being possessed by the actual Twilight. This resulted in a devastating battle between Buffy and possessed Angel, providing us with one of the most emotionally heavy moments of the entire show. Angel has all the powers of a vampire as well as the looks of a supermodel. I guess we can all see why Buffy fell for this lovable anti-hero. Giles. This former librarian from Sunnydale High is way more than he appears at first glance. Though an uptight everyman in every respect, Rupert Edmund Giles is actually the descendant of a family that has been on the Watchers Council for centuries. As Watcher, Giles is responsible for studying, tracking, and combating malevolent supernatural entities, and as Sunnydale seems to have been built on top of the convergence point for the supernatural, he naturally moved there. Giles is also responsible for Buffy and her actions. Episode after episode, Giles has proved why he is the perfect father figure for Buffy, as he is often the first person our Slayer goes to when faced with a problem. Due to this, Giles's library is the de facto command center for the Scooby Gang. Despite being constantly annoyed by her, Giles cares deeply about Buffy and has risked his own well-being multiple times to save the girl. Strangely, back in his teenage years, Giles used to be quite the wild child, and we do catch a glimpse of this when he is reverted to his youth by an enchanted candy. These episodes are extremely hilarious, especially when the usually reserved librarian begins to court Buffy's mother, Joyce Summers. Though Giles exhibits now supernatural powers, his status as Watcher makes him privy to a lot of ancient knowledge and lore about the Buffyverse. His special skills is research, and given enough time, Giles can come up with solutions to almost every problem. In combat, he is skilled at sword fighting and jiu-jitsu, which allows him to hold his own against enemies like the Vampire Angel. In stark contrast to his usual mild-mannered self, Giles is actually quite prone to losing control when something threatens Buffy and her friends. The man has literally killed with his bare hands for his ward, and vampires should just learn to not get in his way anymore. Giles' skill in Slayer combat and his immense knowledge of demonology are proof that there could be no better mentor for our young Slayer. Why Buffy is a must-watch. The more we think about it, the more we realize that it's no coincidence that Sunnydale High is situated right above a portal to hell. In many ways, high school is hell. With raging hormones, identity issues, and failed romances, adolescence might just be the single most terrifying period of our human lives. Though Buffy is, in reality, a horror adventure with demons and ghosts and spirits, we dare you to find another tale that captures the complexity of our teenage years with such respect and nuance. Each episode is a truly captivating story by itself, but what makes Buffy truly a binge-worthy fest is the attention it pays to the longer, overarching story arcs that carry on through every installment. If you can name a TV storytelling trope, chances are that Buffy did it first. Over its 7 seasons, the show has incorporated everything from seasonal arcs to experimental structure in its fold, making Buffy the Vampire Slayer a truly one-of-a-kind experience. In many ways, Buffy bravely faced the true true existentialism and pathos of life, broaching subjects that many young adult shows would gladly shy away from. But the show doesn't stop at just that. It genuinely has a lot to say about diverse issues, which can range from parental abuse to sexual identity. Somehow, we can't help but wonder whether Buffy is even more relevant now than it ever was before. After all, with the rapid rise of social media, the entire world has been transformed into something of a high school. And of course, Buffy is a true testament to the power of feminist filmmaking if done with the right intentions. So yeah, to us, Buffy is still and will always remain a must-watch. Marvelous verdict. Here we reach the end of the long saga that is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. What more could we say about the show that is inspired in literal field of academic analysis? Is it good? You bet it is. But if we're being honest, Buffy is much better than just good. Buffy is truly one of those rare stories that make you a better person and offer you solutions to problems that are not only real but also incredibly important. So yeah, go ahead. Give it a watch. You won't be disappointed. That's it for this video, but do let us know what aspects of Buffy's story we should explore in our next video. Until then, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated with our marvelous content. Needless to say, we will see you again next time, so have a good one, and be on the lookout for any lingering bloodsuckers. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.